Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, our live demonstration of CyberSaint's new remediation suite. My name is Ethan Bresnahan. I'm the marketing director here at CyberSaint, and today I'm excited to welcome back CyberSaint co-founder and chief product officer Patrick O'Reilly, and welcome CyberSaint senior UI UX engineer Lauren Mulvihill. We're so glad that you can join us. And please feel free to submit questions throughout the presentation. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started. To kick things off, I kind of want to dive into the principles that informed the approach to the remediation suite. Patrick, as the CyberSaint product visionary, you've brought a lot of first principles approach to building the CyberStrong product, even just from the ground up. What first principles would you say informed this new feature set as you started to conceptualize building it?
Yeah, well, there are a couple of first principles involved, I think. One of which is that risk management is a cycle. Mm-hmm. Or some people like to say a flywheel. So, you assess, then you manage, and then you remediate, and you just sort of keep going around the cycle. And the other first principle really is that risk management practices across the planet have a pretty clear way of putting their risks into buckets or classifying them, so that they know what to do with them. So I did a big event yesterday with the insurance industry, and that's transference of risk, right? You can avoid a risk, you can mitigate a risk. There's several ways you can treat a risk. So it's called risk treatment. ISO and IEC, have a pretty elaborate set of standards around risk treatment. NIST, the National Institutes of Standards and Technology, also have the RMF, for the risk management framework, that is in wide adoption throughout the federal government. And these principles have disseminated through to private industry as well. So the first principles are really, once you have a risk, you have to do something to it, right? And in order to do it, you have to get buy-in. And in order to get buy-in, you have to socialize it. In order to socialize it, you have to have clear ways of presenting it. So that's sort of where we're coming from on it.
Well, we can go ahead and pull up some slides here to kind of contextualize some things as we start to dive in a little bit further here. So, Lauren, feel free to chime in here. I think this, I know you kind of distilled a lot of this down during the design process. But I think something that's particularly unique, and I know we're going to dive into this a little bit further later on as we kind of think about where this feature set fits in practitioners' workflows. But to your point, Patty, the kind of completing the cyber risk management lifecycle, if you want to call it that, that's not necessarily a particularly novel concept, right? So in so much as we're addressing the kind of unmet needs of the market, can you kind of dive into this, the problem that we have here of cybersecurity professionals are not confident in their prioritization of identified risks to remediate? Patrick, we'll start with you, and then we'll get your thoughts, Lauren, too.
Yeah, well, I heard a great distillation of it yesterday. Again, it was an insurer, a very large insurer, multinational, talking about the difference between cyber insurance and property and casualty. Mm-hmm. And in cyber insurance, he has to do a fair amount of digging about to determine what the risk exposure is with the client. So, there's a lot of due diligence around the issue of, what do these impacts look like? What do your risks look like? What do you want to insure? Whereas with property and casualty, he would call up his friends in property and casualty insurance and say, you guys have it easy, because the client comes to you with their exposures. They come to you with a list of properties that they want to insure, and they understand exactly what their exposures are on those properties. So not only are they not confident on their prioritization of the identified risk to remediate, they're only getting to the point where they're understanding that risk. So, if that's the case, the remediation process is kind of new for them as well. But in order to truly remediate, you need budget. You might need to buy a new security product. You might need to do some awareness and training. And in order to do that, you have to have the business context to get the resources that are required for it. So, what do you see here in the why? Well, what does it mean to struggle to quantify a remediation impact? Well, you might have a menu of things you can do, right? But you might not be able to understand what those, if you did those things, how to compare them. So if you bought a product, or you trained up a group of employees, or you assigned a worker to it, what are the different impacts, and which controls do they impact as well? And what is the cost across projects? That's another issue. So, the real problem is, we see it when we work with companies, and Lauren's done brilliant work in this area, because our clients helped us to frame this, is they're getting better at quantifying risk, for sure, definitely improving in that area. But making the case around several projects or ways to approach remediation, and the actual ROI involved on that, that's where they really struggle when they get inside the meetings that are resource, deciding meetings. So that's, as the industry has matured, as cyber risk has matured, the state of Texas said it to me once. They said, well, now that we understand what our risks are, what the hell do we do about them, right? So that's the essence of this.
Gotcha. Lauren, any additional thoughts from you, as far as kind of from a lot of the conversations that you've had with customers, design partners, just across the board, from kind of a problem to be addressed perspective? What were you hearing?
Yeah, definitely. So I would say, when we first started talking with customers, the reason, and I have a slide a couple forward that touches on this as well, but usually the UX design process, we have a sense of what we want to build. Then we do some designs and do what we call usability testing to make sure that there's no friction points and it flows well. But what's unique about this project is,
yeah, we can jump around if it's easier. Okay. Going off we don't necessarily have to go in order.
Sounds good. We ended up actually talking to some customers first to get a sense of, hey, what would be beneficial for us to build for you? And why we framed the slide that way is, what's the problem you're trying to solve here by identifying risks that you want to remediate? Because, as Patty was saying, the overarching theme here was, okay, we've been able to identify some risks, but it's still hard for us to quantify them. What do we do about them? How do we prioritize them? And an interesting thing from some of these conversations was, they all wanted to compare risks in different ways. And in our product too, we have 3 different risk types, and we didn't see a platform out there too that helped someone compare across multiple risk types. So I think that we'll touch on that as well in a second, but gave us a competitive is giving us an edge with the feature that we'll show you some slides on in a little bit.
Gotcha. So I think and to jump around here again, I think something that I want to drill into before we kind of get into the solution overview a little bit more is the unique value to security leaders. Because to your point, to both of your points, a lot of the concept of remediation is not necessarily particularly new, but the approach here is a little unique. So I want to kind of dive into what elements, as far as zeroing in on kind of that prioritization and visibility angle, and kind of compare to what folks have already been seeing in the market, and kind of how that differentiates. So Lauren, we'll start with you this time. How have you seen kind of this feature set differentiate itself from what's already out there, and what has gotten folks excited as this unique feature set?
And I'll add to something that came out of the initial conversations, which is why it was helpful to have them, was no one really found a product out there that's doing what we were doing. We had some requests, it's interesting, that talk about wanting this to be more of a project management focused tool. But I think a strength of what we have is hitting at more of those pain points of, well, how do I decide which risks to focus on remediating? How do I compare the dollar value? How we're reducing potential loss value? Some of those things that, when you focus more on the project management and task, it's not a one-for-one there. So I think that was interesting to come out of conversations. We really are trying to stray away from, there's other tools that do project management and task-focused management better than what we want to do. We want to, focus on what we do best, which is cybersecurity. I think that's a huge differentiator. Yeah.
Gotcha. Patty, any additional thoughts as far as kind of the unique value and kind of how the remediation suite stands out against kind of some of those comparators, whether that's project management or outside of that?
Yeah, project management. Yeah, I do have a couple of thoughts. You're not going to walk into the boardroom or the C-suite with your Jira. You're just not. You're not going to show senior executives a lot of Gantt charts and tasks that scroll down and the ownership of those tasks and the timelines. That's not what they're interested in. And security leaders have struggled sometimes to get the resources they need. It's everyone's in a resource-strapped environment, currently, but even historically, cyber has been a little bit under-resourced. And some of the changes that are coming through on the side with the SEC regulations, states very clearly. Chairman Gensler stated very clearly that how a company manages their cyber risk is a part of the equity of that company. Now, a lot of the CISOs and risk and compliance teams we talk to, they understand that quite clearly. What they've struggled with is saying, hey, here's our risk. This is our exposure on this risk. And these are the things we can do. And this is how much they cost. So this is really the bang for the buck you'd be getting, right? Which is really a business argument. And it can be a business and growth driver, for companies that are doing a lot of, digital transformation, moving to the cloud or virtualizing their workforces, to have the actual security baked in and rationalized in terms of the investment and the impact to the risk. That's just, good business. And security teams have historically maybe wanted to get down into the weeds a bit too much because that's, they're comfortable there. But they're beginning to understand that, this is a business discussion and the context is a little bit different and the storytelling is a little bit different. We don't really want to do project management. We do want to be able to empower the security leaders to make solid arguments based on investment that get them the resources they need, that also demonstrate their wins with respect to buying down risk as well.
How do you, and there's a little bit of a product vision question for you, to that point about kind of you're not going to pull up your Jira board in a board meeting. How do you see these kind of the remediation suite and those more project management oriented features designed for kind of like tracking progress in a remediation effort? How do you see those things interacting in the future? Obviously that, there's not necessarily, it's not that they're connected at this point, but do you see there being a connection, or do you see that the function is discrete enough in the sense that there's very little overlap between the two audiences?
Yeah, I don't know that there's very little overlap. I would say there is definite overlap, in the sense that we are, allowing you to model projects financially, right? So CapEx, labor, O&M, costs, timelines, right? There may be some interaction over those timelines, if you're able to chunk those projects into their attendant tasks, to do some back and forth. But we wanted to make sure that we didn't start with that presumption. We want to see organically how teams, operationalize the sort of scenario generating capability to build the case around security projects that address risks, that address controls. I think in the future, there's all sorts of things that can be done. I mean, we've been working with AI and, remediation, sometimes breaks into, remediations that are understood in the context of threat-based analysis. And then those remediations relate back to controls too. So there's a huge opportunity vision-wise to sort of harmonize all of that going forward. And that may be, a state where we are talking to more intensive project management-based softwares. We do have integration into Jira at the level of our controls, but I've yet to see, sort of the full workflow lifecycle on this stuff. And I think it'll come up as we put the functionality in to sort of tease out the additional requirements.
Gotcha. So to kind of dive into overview of the solution itself here, as we, just to be cognizant of time. Lauren, do you kind of want to give us an overview of kind of your, I guess, mandate, your prompt as you started designing the remediation suite?
Yeah. And as a designer, I always like to start with what's the problem we're trying to solve, or else you're not sure if it's going to add value to the ones using it. Mm-hmm. And to preface too, we heard different terminology from customers, but we landed on projects. So you're going to hear us talk about that frame a lot. So when I say risk remediation projects, it's just that combined source of how many risks this project's going to remediate. But the solution statement we have here is to create a workflow to allow users to add those risk remediation projects into the platform. We kind of have two paths that you'll see in a second, either risk-based or control-based. Since not all companies are at that maturity of having risks defined yet, they might want to go out the control route to give them a starting point for quantifying the impact of completing those projects. So in the solution that we have, you can add multiple risks from multiple risk types. Not sure if we touched on that earlier, but that was a huge selling point for a lot of the customers we spoke to, as some platforms are limited to one risk or one risk type today. We show various data points, another huge advantage for us here, because depending on your company size, your company maturity, you may be at a point where you are focused more on cost versus your return on security investment. So in our solution, we make sure we have all of these metrics available for you to compare your projects against, such as priority, your loss, return on security investment, and project cost. Our loss data is backed by actuarial data sets. So not just numbers that we're inputting, we have real data to back that value. And then it's also just a holistic view of what it would take to complete a remediation project to allow people that are inputting these to plan more efficiently. Not sure if you want to add anything, Patty, or else I can start jumping into the...
No, to plan more efficiently and to socialize those plans. Yeah, that's all I'd add. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. We touched on this one a little bit, but I'll just do a quick flyby of how we approach this project. So we talk to customers up front. I always like to come back and kind of refine requirements in the scope of the project, because as we touched on a little bit earlier, we could go further with all of this, but we want to start somewhere and iterate from there. Did some of the designs initially and put some customers through kind of a pseudo conversation and usability test, because part of this is adding in a project to our platform. We wanted to make sure there were no friction points or confusion when someone was going through those steps, but also to just get feedback to make sure what we were designing was resonating with people. We did a little bit of iteration, and now we have it live in platform, but with any tech feature that we build, we're constantly going to be improving that and iterating on it. And I threw in a couple bullet points of feedback we've got from some of those sessions, which you can read here if you want. But what I think is really cool is that people really felt like this is going to help them and in different ways. And it really did confirm to me that some of the pain points we were seeing without having a solution like this for customers to be using, that hopefully it will really add some value to them. And as Patty was mentioning, give people like a common language to speak to when they go to the board, versus getting into that granularity of, well, here's the tickets we're working on. Those are kind of harder to make sense of than when you see actual dollar values and the loss potential that you're avoiding and metrics like that. And we have about 10 minutes left, so I'll start jumping into the design so you can see what we're talking to with the solution here. So in our platform today, to get to this new feature, you'll want to go to the risk section. And we did this intentionally because, as it's called, risk remediation, it's building off of somebody adding risks to our platform. So it's kind of the other view. The one view is, okay, we've identified threats, these risks to our company. What can we do to remediate them? And on the top level, we have the cost aggregates, so project cost and total project cost for all the projects you deem that are in progress for what you've inputted, versus the potential loss that you would be avoiding if you were to complete those projects. So the dashboard is just a reflection of the projects that you want to work on. You'll see in a second that you can put a different status to the projects you enter. And we did this intentionally because part of this feature, we really want people to compare the projects that they want to work on to make sure that they're getting the most value out of them. When someone goes to add a project, there's a couple pieces of data we need from them. So obviously naming it, description, identifying when they'd want it to start and how long it might take, if they have any priority for it, and if this is just something they want to propose to compare against other projects, or if they know off the bat they want to commit to it, as well as like many of our features and product, if any owners want to be assigned. So we allow people to add either by risk scenario or by control. When we had early discussions with this project, we heard from customers and we talked internally, and we're going to approach it on a control level, but we realized with talking with customers more that it might be too granular. So we took it a step up and are letting people add by risk, which has controls associated if you so choose when you add risks, or you can still choose by controls. But if you'll see on the right, we have split it up in a way that's kind of more digestible for people by rolling them up into CSF functions, categories, and subcategories. I will say this image right here that you're seeing really resonated with our customers. There was a lot of, oh, my team will understand this, or oh, my board will understand this if I show, hey, this project's going to hit on these things. So kind of that going into that theme of we wanted to make sure this feature is speaking to the right audience, that higher level board, but you still have that capability to drill down for the team that's actually going to be working on controls to buy down risk. Our third step is to add in target scores. Patty, do you want to speak to this, as this was kind of came from your idea?
Sure, yeah. The basic idea here is when you select a project, which functional areas will it hit, right? And how much of a bump up either in scores at the control level or maturity are you going for? So, I think we all know in security that, getting to 100% might be prohibitively expensive, but you can get a lot of bang for the buck, just by advancing your controls up by 10% or 15%. And this is really how we generate some of the return on security investment metrics. So it's through a remediation percentage, which sometimes is also called a mitigation ratio. So with the controls and the CSF subcategories and categories, how far you are able to advance it will impact the actual loss values. So it's a cool way and a really defensible way to conceptualize security in the context of risk. And it's a first principle approach. Remediation historically goes back to this analysis, which is called a gap analysis. So you analyze where you are, you baseline, and then you set a target, and then you've got a gap. So this is really about getting that gap closed and improving the resiliency of your systems and your processes and your technology, and being able to do it in a way that allows for dollar calculations associated with it. So the actual effort here is quantified in terms of the money spent.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Patty. You articulated that better than I would have.
That was part of my job. They make me talk a lot.
And to wrap up adding a project, we obviously need to know how much it might cost. This part is all entered manually, so it's just an estimate based on what the one-time cost is, labor, and then recurring. But it is to give a sense, again, that starting point of if I were to complete this project, how much might it cost versus how much might I receive in value. And once projects are added, they'll be in this table that show all these different value points that might be more of priority to some than others. So again, if that company is more focused on costs at this point, they might decide to work on the lower cost projects versus a company that might have more of a bigger budget and care more about what's priority and what's going to give me my biggest return. And this is just the table view. I think a big thing in cybersecurity is we want visuals, but we also sometimes need to see that raw data. But we also have some visualization tools in our product to help people better compare against each other. So one of the things that we've added is this line chart to help someone compare against project return on security investment over time. And we also have another thing that has resonated with customers is a modeling tool within each project to show, hey, if I were to increase, kind of as Patty was mentioning, you have a baseline of your control scores and the target you want to reach. What were to happen if I were to improve some of these categories in terms of my loss value? So we are currently working on putting this in platform, but a way to model those changes to maybe help someone determine which projects they'd like to commit to. And that is a high-level view and some screenshots of our current risk remediation feature that we have added.
Fantastic. Awesome. Well, that was great and incredibly exciting to finally be able to get this out, talk about it, show it. Incredible work to both of you, as well as just the general team that put this together. Incredibly excited and just very kind of blown away from a lot of the early feedback that we've been hearing from customers as they've started to see, as we started to roll this out. As Lauren said, for anyone who is participating live, feel free to submit questions. We'll be wrapping, as we start to wrap up here, we'll address any that come through. But with that, I'm going to end the slides here. And any parting thoughts from either of you as we start to wind down, and any last minute questions trickle in?
No, not really. Other than, this process has been, educational too, in some respects. We definitely had some ideas. One of the nice things about having Lauren around is we've got a lot of ideas about what needs to be done, but Lauren will actually, sort of get down to brass tacks and talk to people about it. And it just refines the functionality so much. And, it's kind of come through, almost a customer advisory board in some ways, which in my experience in software, the more sort of acceptance testing you do and ease of use testing, the better the features tend to come out. And this has been a long road. I mean, I can remember the conversations we were having about this over a year ago. And we had some documents knocking around, and it was all very, it was very well-intentioned stuff, and it had some good ideas in it, but it was raw material. And to see Lauren refine this over time with our customers and prospects, it's been just a great journey.
Definitely. Well, congrats to both of you for closing the loop, if you will. But Lauren, any parting thoughts? Any parting thoughts from you?
Yeah, just to add to that, I think I'm not a cybersecurity expert, UX designer by trade, but I think such an important thing to any company, any industry is just talking to customers, getting that feedback and incorporating it. So I'm not sure if we share emails or anything after this, but please always reach out if you have feedback or how we can improve our product, because we definitely listen and want to make sure it's incorporated to better your experience.
Absolutely. So if you are a CyberStrong user, by all means, feel free to reach out to your CSM and definitely connect with Lauren if you can. She's been great. Great to work with, both as a CyberSaint team member, but also from the folks that we've collaborated with together. But for those of you who are not yet CyberStrong users and would like to learn more, feel free to visit us at cybersaint.io or reach out at info@cybersaint.io. We'd love to hear from you. Patty, Lauren, great as always to catch up. Thank you so much for the time today.
Thank you, Ethan. Thank you, Lauren. Thanks all.
Take care.
Bye now.